Welcome to the homework video for the translators and trace tables rather. Homework, nice, easy, simple, straightforward task for you guys to do. So we'll just dive straight in. So the first question is just a simple matching up for the two types of translator, which hopefully you know are interpreter and the compiler. So just a quick overview from me. I won't give away the answers. So interpreter, best for debugging because it translates and executes one line of code at a time. Now if the line executes with no problems, it continues on to the next line and so on and so forth until it gets to the last line. No errors, the program will execute and run fine. The issue with that is that every time you execute the program with an interpreter, it has to translate it all again. It's also very slow, which we'll talk about in the next question of how it must translate each line in turn. So in loops and things like that, a loop that executes 10 times, an interpreter would translate that 10 times. So it's best for debugging, it is best for using whilst we're working on the program, but it's no good really once we've finished. But it's best for finding errors because when that line doesn't translate when it's executed, it will identify that that line contains an error and it will direct you to that line immediately, and it will tell you line 3 there's an error, and it will also tell you what it can identify about that line, whether there's a variable not declared and so on. So we'll talk about error types another time. Now the compiler does return the errors, but it returns them as a list at the end. So I mean, you can still use it for debugging. It's just better in practice to use the interpreter because it identifies them in the order they appear. And sometimes in very massive programs, you could have 1,000 errors that are caused by the user mistyping the one variable 1,000 times that it's been referenced. So what's a compiler good for? Well, it creates an executable file when it's translated successfully, when there's no errors. That means as soon as you have that exe file, we no longer need the compiler, so it doesn't have to take up any processor time or processor memory or anything like that. So it also results in a program that translates and executes much faster because it doesn't have to keep continually repeating loops. It just translates and executes them once and moves on. Next question on a trace table, which is what we use to check that our program is executing and giving the correct outputs that we expect. Now there may be more rows in this table than you require, just to try and trick you up. So if you look at the beginning, the x value is set to 0, and then we have this repeat until loop, which is a conditional loop that repeats until x is larger than 10. Now if you think about that, x larger than 10, is the number 10 larger than 10? I'll leave that up for you to decide. And you've got a simple conditional statement in there that says if x is bigger than 5, then x is sent to display, i.e. is printed. Otherwise, else, hello is printed. Next question kind of covered already. Why would an interpreter involve more translations of the for next loop, which is this repeat until actually is what it should say, compared to a compiler? That is going back to what I said. Every time the interpreter hits that loop part, it translates it again. So every time that loop has to execute, the interpreter translates it every one of those times as well, whereas a compiler has to translate and execute it once. Where are things that we work on that are currently being used by the program stored before they're executed? Well, specifically they're in registers, but they're stored in RAM memory, random access memory, which is temporary, erased when the power's turned off. And state type, everything is written in the computer system. Well, I won't tell you what the answer actually is, but I will give you a hint as to what everything is represented by in a computer system.